Welcome back. We've got breaking news from Merck this morning as the pharmaceutical giant is beginning construction of a $1 billion, 470,000 square foot state-of-the-art biologics center in Wilmington, Delaware. We are talking about that this morning as we look at the stock up fractionally this morning at 83.30. Joining me now in this exclusive is the CEO of Merck, Robert Davis. Robert, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Well, thanks for having me, Maria. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, congratulations on this big announcement. We talk all the time about how we are so reliant on China for prescription drugs. Tell us about bringing manufacturing back to the United States. When are you expecting it to be online, and what's the significance, sir?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. Now, obviously, this is something we've been actually working on for a while. This really goes back to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was put in place during the first Trump administration. We started investing under a new strategy to source U.S. patients at that time, and have been doing so since then, with over $12 billion invested to date and an additional $9 billion, more than $9 billion potentially coming, with this being the first billion of that investment. And this is really exciting because it's really going to be a state-of-the-art biologics manufacturing facility with the capability to do both drug substance and drug product. And over time, it's going to have the capability, and our intent is to make this the home for Katruda, which is obviously our very important oncology drug, to make sure that we can serve the patients facing the devastating disease of cancer from drugs made here in the United States.
Well,
so we're quite excited about this and really see it as a first step.
I love that because, of course, Katruda is the world's best-selling medicine, and so many people have been saved as a result of that. So thank you for that. We're going to get to that in a moment. I want to know the impact of this biologics center in terms of jobs, and I think it's really interesting what you just said, that you started investing and thinking about this back in the first Trump administration because of that tax cut package. So you're saying that you actually moved on that policy. What does policy out of Washington mean for a company like yours when you see, for example, tax cut extensions? That will trigger you to actually take action.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I would say that, you know, what the original Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was done and really put in place back in 2018, it equalized the tax treatment for money cash held outside the United States. That allowed us to bring back our cash and invest here. And as I said, that's $12 billion to date since then, with over $9 billion more to come. So policy does matter, and we think definitely favorable tax policy is something that we're very supportive of. But to your question on the number of jobs, you know, I'm excited because this will mean high-paying jobs here in the United States. With the initial $1 billion investment, that'll be 500 full-time positions running that site. We're going to actually employ initially 4,000 construction workers. But as we look at the potential to expand in this site, and we have the ability to expand this site potentially up to $5 billion, that could take the workforce up to 2,000 and take the number of construction workers that we will employ over time to build those facilities up to nearly 30,000. So it will be a meaningful opportunity both for tradesmen and for manufacturing to have good, high-quality paying jobs here in the United States.
Well, this is a huge point, sir, and it's not only so incredibly impactful for the patients who need these therapies and need these medicines, but also for the state, Wilmington's biotech sector and the entire area of Wilmington. Let me stay on Katruda for a minute. Such an important part of your business, $30 billion franchise. We know that the patent is coming to an end. It is going to lose patent in 2028. And I want to get your take on what happens next, sir. Once that patent expires, what do you want to tell investors? What do you want to tell our audience about how you replace that and what is in the pipeline for the next major medicine?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question. Obviously, to your point, Katruda has been such an important drug for so many people, but we have to look to the future. And obviously, one of the things we're looking to do is to continue to evolve and improve upon both Katruda and our broader oncology portfolio, which is much more diversified. But in the near term, we do have a subcutaneous form of pembrolizumab coming, which we think will be important. We think 30 to 40% of the patients who would be normally people on Katruda would prefer the subcutaneous form. But more important than that is we are investing heavily in antibody drug conjugates, next generation tissue targeting therapies, all that can combine with Katruda and be monotherapy to really improve upon the outcomes that patients facing cancer have. So our investment in cancer will continue. Our leadership will continue in a much more diversified portfolio. And then we're broadening behind that. We've leveraged that into positions into immunology, into cardiometabolic. We're very excited. We have an oral PCSK9, which is an oral version of the monoclonal antibodies for arteriosclerosis. It's an important drug coming next year, multiple vaccines. So really, if you look at it going forward, we think by the time you get out to the mid-2030s, we could have over $50 billion of potential revenue coming from new products. And that's based on launching in the next 3 to 5 years, 20 plus new products. So we have a very large, diverse pipeline. And that's why in other settings, I've said, we see the Katruda challenge as more of a hill than a cliff. And I'm confident we'll get back to growth as we get beyond the Katruda LOE, because we see the sustainability of this business is not only important, frankly, for the shareholders, but for the patients we serve.
Absolutely. I want to thank you for that. Katruda has changed so many people's lives, and I want to congratulate your scientists and your engineers there behind Katruda. Let me get your take on the impact of President Trump's tariffs. We've been talking about the president's first 100 days all morning, sir. How will these tariffs impact your business?
Yeah, so the tariffs that have been announced to date will have a nominal impact. It's about $200 million in the year 2024, or I'm sorry, in 2025. But as you look forward, I think what you're really talking about is the potential for sectoral tariffs, specifically on pharmaceuticals. And obviously, I believe the actions we're taking, both in terms of what we've done in the short term to prepare with our inventory management, but more importantly, the investments we've already started to make, like the groundbreaking we're doing today here in Wilmington, is going to prepare us for the medium to long term to have the manufacturing, either through our own internal sites plus contract manufacturers, to make sure we can source drugs for the U.S. population from the United States. And so we'll be aligned with what the Trump administration's policies are trying to drive. We're going to create jobs in the U.S., and in doing so, I think the tariffs will be a manageable situation for us.
This is such an important point, Robert, because President Trump has tried to get us less dependent on communist China. And I want to get your take there as well. Of course, there was a lot of skepticism and uncertainty over Gardasil, the other major franchise at Merck, an $11 billion franchise there. China, a big part of that. What do you want to say about Gardasil and about relying on communist China for prescription drugs in America?
Yeah, well, obviously, as we look at our portfolio, it's important to understand we really source none of the drug substance or drug product for the United States from China. As an innovative company, we're either sourcing from the U.S. We actually do have operations in Europe and some in India, but really not from China. And for import into China, so we actually import Gardasil into China,
right,
from outside of the country, and then other products there we produce locally for China. And as I look at the Gardasil franchise going forward, it continues to be a very important franchise. This is an anti-cancer vaccine. It has the ability to, if we can get people to 90% vaccination rates, to eliminate cervical cancer, and can meaningfully change the trajectory of head and neck cancers, which are a growing cancer. In the United States, there are more head and neck cancer cases today in males than there are cervical cancers in females because of the progress we've made in addressing cervical cancer. So we need more, and we see an opportunity for strong growth both in the U.S. and globally, and that's assuming China does not come back. We've largely seen the China business has really kind of stopped at the moment. We think over time it can start to grow again as we bring the male indication to China based on 2 new approvals we have there. But we're not counting on that. It's an opportunity. But what we're really looking at is strong growth everywhere else around the world and continuing to drive that important franchise as we look forward.
Yeah, I'm really glad to ensure that you've got this plan and you can communicate that plan, because I know that there was speculation that the Chinese were trying to push their own local product in China and encourage that over Gardasil, which has been incredibly so successful, and we thank you for that as well. Robert, what do you want to say about pricing? This is another issue that President Trump is trying to take on, getting the middleman out so that some of these critical drugs for patients everywhere will not go bankrupt, having to actually get these drugs and these medicines. The middleman being the pharmaceutical, benefit managers. What can you tell us about pricing?
Yeah, so you've raised what is obviously we as an industry and as Merck see as an important point. We need to address the cost of pharmaceuticals for the patients out of pocket in the United States, and to drive and improve the differential between what is in the U.S. and outside the United States. An important element you just raised is if you look at what happens in our system, and I don't think people understand this, for every dollar that is paid for a pharmaceutical, less than 50 cents of that dollar comes to the innovator and the manufacturer. Over 50 cents goes into the middle. And our view is if we can see more of that sits in the middle be returned to the patient to reduce their costs, think of how much we can bring down the cost of medicines here in the United States. And then if we do that, we then need to work with our partners outside the United States, governments around the world, to make sure they pay their fair share of what is the cost of these medicines, to make sure that they understand and reward us for the value our innovation creates.
Right.
And I think if we do that, both at the same time, we can bring a better balance that will allow us to ensure access to medicines at affordable prices. And the only other thing I'd add, and I do very much appreciate President Trump's executive order where he's also supportive of the pill penalty, which is this notion that small molecules, which are used to treat cancer and a lot of neuroscience diseases, are disadvantaged versus large molecules, biologics, in the way we negotiate with Medicare. And he's trying to drive to correct that and equalize that, which is important because it will ensure that we do the science what is best for the patient.
Yes. Using
whatever form, whether it's a small molecule or a large molecule, to deliver the best medicine. And so we're very supportive of moving the negotiating period from 9 years for the small molecule to 13, which matches what is today the large molecule. And that was in his executive order, and we're also very appreciative that he addressed that, and also some language around 340B. So. Yeah. In many ways, I think there's opportunity for common ground where we can work with the administration going forward.
That is a huge point. Let me end where we began, sir, and that is on this groundbreaking for this new biologics center in Wilmington. I know you were producing much of the Katruda business in Ireland. How much of that comes now to the United States?
So over time, we will move all of the production for the United States into the United States. It's going to take us time because obviously we have to build the capability. We do contract manufacturing for the drug substance today in the United States as well as outside the U.S., but we're going to move to have both drug substance and drug product be in the U.S. For Ireland, what that means is not necessarily that we're going to close down operations, because we still have to serve the rest of the world too. And so this is really an opportunity for us to U.S. for U.S., Europe for Europe, and have a much more risk-mitigated, resilient supply chain that has optionality that allows us to bring security. And as we think about national security, this is important. Security to the drug supply in the United States so that we can ensure that no matter what the situation is, U.S. patients get access to medicine.
Robert, it's wonderful to have you this morning. Congratulations on this. And again, I know patients everywhere are grateful for Katruda and Gardasil and your efforts. Please come back soon, sir. Thank you.